Mark and Evelyn Thompson had lived a quiet, uneventful life for more than 3 decades. Both 55, they had grown up in the same small suburban town, attending the same schools, working the same neighborhoods, and quietly building their lives together. They weren't wealthy by any stretch. Mark worked as a mechanic in a local garage, while Evelyn spent her days as a receptionist at a nearby clinic. They were careful with their money, saving diligently for retirement, and content with the simple pleasures of life. Sunday walks, occasional dinners out, and quiet evenings at home. Their home reflected their modest lifestyle. A 2-story house on a calm street, it was painted a soft beige and surrounded by a neatly trimmed lawn. Inside, the furniture was worn but well-maintained, photographs lined the walls, and their lives seemed ordinary to anyone walking by. But the Thompsons were meticulous in little ways that spoke volumes about their personalities. They checked locks 3 times before leaving the house, balanced every penny in a ledger, and kept a detailed calendar of birthdays, anniversaries, and appointments. Life was predictable, safe, and secure. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, they stopped at the corner convenience store after picking up groceries. The store was crowded with the morning rush, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly overhead. Mark wandered through the aisles while Evelyn waited near the counter. On a whim, Mark picked up a lottery ticket, something he rarely did, and slid it across to Evelyn with a teasing smile. "Why not?" he said. "It could be fun." Evelyn chuckled and tucked it into her purse, dismissing it as just another idle fantasy, the kind of thing neighbors joked about over coffee or at the grocery checkout. Neither of them imagined that this single ticket would mark the beginning of a life-altering chain of events. Later that evening, they settled on the couch, exhausted from a long day. The television played softly in the background as they absent-mindedly scratched off the numbers on the ticket. As each number revealed itself, their expression shifted from mild curiosity to disbelief. The final number appeared, and reality hit with staggering force. They had won. $50 million. The room seemed to vibrate with the weight of their sudden fortune. They stared at each other, hands trembling, unable to speak. The dreams they had quietly nurtured over decades, early retirement, travel, new furniture, perhaps even a small cabin by the lake, suddenly seemed within reach. Word spread quickly. Friends, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances called, congratulating them, offering advice, and sometimes hinting at envy. Mark and Evelyn tried to navigate the flood of attention with caution, but the excitement was intoxicating. Cameras captured them walking carefully through their neighborhood, smiling politely, clutching the winning ticket as if it were fragile glass. They visited banks to discuss investments, planned vacations they had only dreamed of, and spoke in hushed tones about the life they could finally lead. Yet beneath the surface of their excitement, a subtle tension began to build. They looked over their shoulders more often, paused at the sound of passing cars, and seemed hyper-aware of every unfamiliar face. The victory that should have brought them pure joy carried an unexpected weight, a sense of vulnerability, and the realization that with fortune came attention, and with attention, danger. What had started as a normal Tuesday had turned into a life that no one could have predicted, setting the stage for a series of events that would shake the quiet suburban town to its core. The Thompsons' triumph, celebrated with cautious smiles and whispered plans, was only the beginning of a story that would soon take a dark and unimaginable turn. After the initial whirlwind of excitement, Mark and Evelyn Thompson seemed to vanish from public view. For the first 2 days following their lottery win, they stayed inside their house, speaking only in hushed tones and moving quietly from room to room. Neighbors who had once waved cheerfully now watched with curiosity and unease, noticing lights flickering late into the night and the occasional silhouette at the window. Phones went unanswered and messages were left unread. It was as though the couple had disappeared into thin air, leaving the vibrant excitement of their new fortune suspended in silence. Concern grew among friends and family. Mark's sister stopped by, expecting to share in the celebration, only to find the driveway empty and the house eerily still. She called their phones repeatedly, each time reaching voicemail. Evelyn's longtime friend left urgent messages, growing more worried with every passing hour. The couple who had once been so predictable, so reliable, now seemed to have vanished without explanation. By the 3rd day, the concern escalated to the local police, who officially classified Mark and Evelyn as missing persons. Officers visited the neighborhood, speaking to neighbors and scanning the area, but there were no sightings, no clues, nothing to suggest where the Thompsons had gone. When the officers entered the house, the scene appeared outwardly normal, almost too normal. Their car was parked in the driveway, doors locked and the windows drawn. There were no signs of a break-in, no evidence of forced entry, no indication that anyone else had been inside. Yet small details unsettled the investigators. In the living room, a half-packed suitcase sat on the floor, its contents haphazardly arranged. A stack of unopened letters lay neatly beside it, and the kitchen counters were spotless, as though someone had meticulously prepared the home for a sudden departure. It was as if the Thompsons had planned to leave quickly, but had been interrupted mid-motion, leaving behind the fragments of their daily lives. Detectives began to piece together the couple's recent activities. After claiming their $50 million prize, the Thompsons had withdrawn large sums of cash, visited financial advisors, and made plans for investments and vacations. Yet despite this flurry of activity, no one could trace their movements beyond the immediate vicinity of their home. Surveillance footage from nearby stores and traffic cameras showed nothing unusual, no sign of struggle or panic. Only the Thompsons going about ordinary errands in the days following their win. Speculation ran rampant in the town. Some whispered that the couple had decided to escape, fearing taxes or unwanted attention. Others feared a darker possibility, that someone had been watching them, targeting them for the fortune they had suddenly acquired. Even as investigators sifted through phone records and social media accounts, no concrete answers emerged. The house, their sanctuary, became a puzzle of contradictions. It was both lived in and deserted, ordinary and strangely foreboding. By the fifth day, anxiety had reached a tipping point. The once cheerful suburban street had taken on a tense, almost fearful atmosphere. Neighbors avoided eye contact, children stayed closer to home, and the quiet hum of daily life was replaced by the low murmur of rumors. No one could imagine what had happened inside the Thompson household, nor the dark turn their story would soon take. The missing persons case that began as a mystery of absence was about to explode into something far more terrifying than anyone could have anticipated. 5. Days after the Thompsons had claimed their $50 million lottery win, the quiet suburban neighborhood was thrown into chaos. Neighbors noticed a foul odor drifting from the Thompson residence, a sharp, unsettling stench that had no place in the otherwise calm street. Concerned, one neighbor called the police, fearing the worst. Within minutes, uniformed officers arrived, cautious and alert, preparing for a scene they could never have imagined. When the front door was finally opened, the officers were met with a sight that sent chills through their bones. Mark and Evelyn Thompson lay side by side in the living room, their bodies completely still, unnervingly arranged as if posed. Both were wearing scream masks, the iconic white faces frozen in eternal horror. The masks hid any expression, but the scene itself screamed violence and terror. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and though there were no visible signs of struggle, the room carried the oppressive weight of something dark and deliberate. Furniture was slightly displaced, a chair tilted at an odd angle, a coffee table pushed back, as if the final moments of their lives had been orchestrated with precision. Forensic teams arrived quickly, moving carefully through the house. They noted unusual chemical traces in the air, substances that seemed out of place in a typical suburban home. Tiny marks on the floor suggested that the couple had been restrained and moved into position. Every corner of the room was scrutinized, and the investigators' unease grew with each passing moment. This was no ordinary crime scene. The meticulous staging of the scene suggested a message, a psychological element designed to terrify anyone who might discover it. The neighbors were in shock. People who had waved to Mark and Evelyn just days before now stood across the street, staring at the flashing lights and yellow tape. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some whispered that the couple had been targeted for their lottery winnings, imagining burglars or hired criminals. Others speculated about personal grudges, long-held resentments, or financial betrayals that might have turned deadly. Yet the scream masks added an element of the surreal, a theatrical horror that made the tragedy almost unthinkable. Detectives combed through the house, searching for clues in the bedrooms, kitchen, and office. They found nothing to suggest forced entry, no sign that the Thompsons had resisted. The lack of fingerprints and the careful arrangement of the scene hinted at premeditation, suggesting that someone close to the couple, or someone with intimate knowledge of their routines, was responsible. Outside, police questioned neighbors and passers-by, trying to determine if anyone had seen suspicious activity in the days leading up to the deaths. As the sun set over the quiet street, the neighborhood felt transformed. What had once been a picture of suburban calm now resembled a scene from a horror movie. The media soon arrived, broadcasting images of the flashing lights and police activity, sensationalizing the bizarre tableau. The scream masks became the symbol of a tragedy no one could fully understand, a haunting image that would linger in the minds of the town and beyond. In the hours that followed, investigators pieced together fragments of the Thompsons' final days, but the picture remained incomplete. Who had orchestrated this terrifying scene and why? The answers were not yet clear, but one fact was undeniable. The couple's extraordinary luck had ended in unimaginable horror, and the town would never look at its quiet streets the same way again. The investigation into the deaths of Mark and Evelyn Thompson quickly became one of the most complex cases the local police department had ever faced. Detectives worked around the clock, following every lead and examining every detail, yet answers remained elusive. At first, they focused on the couple's recent activities. In the days after claiming the $50 million lottery prize, Mark and Evelyn had withdrawn significant amounts of cash and visited multiple banks, meeting with financial advisors and carefully planning how to manage their newfound wealth. But despite this flurry of activity, no one could trace their movements in the hours leading up to their deaths. Surveillance footage from stores, gas stations, and traffic cameras showed nothing unusual beyond their ordinary errands, making the mystery even more confounding. Interviews with friends and family revealed a picture of a couple who had been cautious and sometimes anxious about their sudden wealth. Multiple sources confirmed that Mark and Evelyn had received threatening letters shortly after their win, demanding large sums of money and warning them to share the fortune or face the consequences. These messages were unsigned, their language cryptic and menacing, yet their tone suggested intimate knowledge of the couple's lives. Detectives began to consider the possibility that someone close to the Thompsons, or someone observing them closely, had orchestrated the attack. The forensic team uncovered more disturbing details. Traces of an unknown chemical were found throughout the house, particularly near the living room where the bodies were discovered. These substances indicated premeditation and suggested that the killer had used a calculated method to incapacitate the victims. Tiny, almost imperceptible marks on the floors and furniture implied that the couple had been moved into position after death, confirming that the scream masks were intentionally placed to create a grotesque tableau. Investigators grew increasingly convinced that this was not a random act of violence, but a carefully staged crime meant to send a message, though the purpose of that message remained unclear. As the investigation progressed, a mysterious figure began to emerge from surveillance footage taken in the days before the Thompsons' deaths. A person, hooded and cautious, was seen near the Thompson residence, lingering at odd hours and keeping a close eye on the house. Detectives worked to identify this individual, but their face was obscured, and their movements were careful and calculated, leaving almost no evidence behind. Meanwhile, financial records showed millions of dollars had been secretly transferred to unknown accounts. The transactions were complex and deliberate, suggesting that the killer or someone involved had knowledge of the couple's financial affairs and could manipulate them to their advantage. Despite the mounting evidence, the motive behind the murders remained shrouded in mystery. The combination of threatening letters, hidden bank transfers, and the theatrical placement of the scream masks hinted at a crime fueled by obsession, greed, and psychological manipulation. Detectives realized that solving the case would require more than standard investigation techniques. They needed to uncover hidden connections, untangle financial trails, and identify anyone with both access and motive. Every lead seemed to raise more questions than answers, and the story of Mark and Evelyn Thompson had transformed from a shocking murder to a labyrinth of deceit, betrayal, and terrifying premeditation. Just when the investigation into Mark and Evelyn Thompson's death seemed to be at a dead end, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During a detailed forensic sweep of the couple's home, police discovered a small encrypted burner phone hidden beneath a floorboard in the master bedroom. It was unremarkable at first glance, a nondescript black device, but when examined by cybercrime specialists, its contents revealed a startling truth. Evelyn had been sending and receiving messages in secret, carefully encrypted to avoid detection. What investigators uncovered in those messages would change the entire perspective of the case. The The messages revealed that Mark and Evelyn had been planning something extraordinary in addition to their lottery win. They had devised an elaborate scheme to fake their own deaths and claim a secret life insurance payout, effectively doubling their fortune. Over weeks, they had discussed logistics, escape routes, and the transfer of funds to offshore accounts. It became clear that the couple's mysterious disappearance in the days after winning the lottery had not been random. They had been preparing for this staged disappearance. Yet, the messages also hinted at tension. Mark appeared increasingly hesitant, questioning the morality and safety of the plan, while Evelyn was resolute, driven by a desire to secure their wealth at any cost. It was during this delicate balance of secrecy and fear that a third party entered the picture. Evidence pointed to a distant relative who had long coveted the Thompsons' modest assets and who had recently learned of their lottery win. This individual, previously considered harmless, had been monitoring the couple closely, aware of their plans and waiting for an opportunity. When the couple's private dispute escalated over the execution of their staged deaths, the relative seized the moment. Investigators concluded that this person intervened in a violent and calculated manner, turning the Thompsons' plan into a real and deadly scenario. The scream masks, once a baffling detail, were revealed to be a final, macabre statement by the killer. By placing the masks over the victims' faces, the perpetrator had turned the house into a terrifying tableau, perhaps to mock the couple's plans or to leave a warning for anyone else who might attempt to interfere. Forensic evidence and digital records showed that every step of the crime was deliberate, from the administration of chemical agents to the positioning of the bodies. It was not random violence, it was a chilling act of revenge, manipulation, and opportunistic murder. As the case closed, investigators pieced together the narrative that had eluded them for days. Mark and Evelyn's dream of instant wealth had led them into a trap of their own making, exploited by someone who had been waiting for the perfect moment. The lottery win, which should have brought freedom and security, became the catalyst for betrayal and death. The suburban street where the Thompsons had lived quietly for decades would forever bear the memory of that grim week, a stark reminder that fortune and tragedy are sometimes separated by only the thinnest line. In the end, the killer was apprehended and charged, the secret plans and hidden messages revealing a story of greed, fear, and deadly ambition. What had begun as a moment of unimaginable joy ended in a tableau of horror, leaving a community stunned and a case that would be remembered as one of the most bizarre and tragic crimes of the decade. The lottery win had promised everything, but it had delivered something far darker.